I'm Cheryl Gray McDonald. It's March the 18th, 2016, and I'm here in Avon, North Carolina, speaking with Mrs. Brooksie Meekins Kuhl. Good morning, Miss Brooksie. Can you tell me when you were born and where you grew up?
I was born August 1st, 1923, here in Avon, North Carolina.
What were your parents' names? Where did they grow up, and what did they do for a living?
Well, my mother grew up at Little Kinnakeet. Her name was Memble Gray. And my father was born here at Avon.
Okay. What did he do for a living?
He had a grocery store, and he had a boat that he traveled on to get groceries for his store.
Okay. Do you recall the name of the boat?
Ruth.
Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he traveled, where did he take the boat
He went to Elizabeth City in Norfolk.
Okay.
And over across the Sound to the Bath, I guess, different places, different, you know, on the Pambico River.
Okay. What were your grandparents' names, and what did they do for a living? And were they born here?
Well, my father's mother and father died before he was, I think he was 2 years old. He moved to an uncle, and he was raised by his uncle.
Okay.
My mother grew up at Little Kinnakeet, and her parents, her father worked for the life-saving station.
See, okay. What did you do for a living, you and your husband?
Well, I went up to Norfolk and worked at the naval base until I was married.
Okay. Now, what was your husband's name?
Herbert Kuhl. He was from Norfolk.
Okay. And what did he do for a living?
He worked for Lone Star Industries.
I see.
And we moved to Richmond in early 1950s. And then he was called in the service. He was with the Naval Reserve. And we went to California and lived in California for 2 years.
Okay.
Then his company was sent up to Richmond. That's why I went to Richmond to live.
Okay, I see. Stanley Green wrote Kinnakeet Adventure. This was a book about coming to Avon in 1930 to be a school teacher and principal. He stayed here until 1943. Can you tell me anything about Mr. Green?
Well, the young people really, liked him an awful lot.
I'd heard that he was popular.
An interest in young people.
Yes.
And we just always thought an awful lot of him, that's all I could say.
Okay. Okay, I'd heard that he was very popular. Can you tell me about the schools that you attended here in Avon, the location, what they looked like, any favorite teachers you might have had, or the number of students?
Well, it's hard for me to remember their names, so I might have it in the book, I don't know.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. What about stores in Avon when you were growing up? What were the names of the stores?
Mr. Farrell Scarborough's store, Mr. Gibb Gray, and my father's store.
Sure, I remember your father's store well. And of course, your father's store was located right here on the family property.
And then there was one down at the end, and that was, I forget the name of the person that read that. Can you remember? Have I got it in there?
Is it Luther Meekins?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. Tell me about the places you went for entertainment and recreation when you were growing up here. What did you like to do as a young person?
Well, there was a place in the village where the young people used to go and dance. What was the band's name that ran that?
I don't know. I don't know. Was that the Breeze Inn?
No,
Okay.
well, I didn't go there. A lot of the young people did, but I didn't. My folks didn't want me to go out there.
I understand that. My folks were
But
strict.
anyway, we used to go to the one in the village there. It was like a pool hall where the men went and played pool. But the young people congregated there.
Okay. Was that Mr. Pritchard's store?
Who?
Pritchard.
Yes.
Pritchard Gray.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was
Yeah,
where you went for
Pritchard,
entertainment. Okay. That's interesting. Did you have any favorite games? You mentioned pool. Did you like to shoot pool?
Well, we all just had our own different games, but it's hard for me to remember exactly what we did. We did play croquet. We had a croquet set and played out here in the backyard a lot.
Oh,
And
I love croquet. Did your family have gardens or any livestock?
my father had a garden out here out to the rest of the house.
Okay. And what did he grow?
And he grew cabbage and greens. And I don't know whether they had cucumbers or not. I can just remember the cabbage and the greens.
Okay. Well, those were the important things. What were some of your favorite meals?
Meals.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was fried chicken.
Fried chicken, but not stewed drum or anything like that? Did you like stews?
Oh, yes, I did.
Uh-huh. And the term boiled cornbread was mentioned in Stanley Green's book. What is that?
That was just, we called them fritters, corn fritters. They just made it with cornmeal, a little flour, and water. I don't think they put anything else, salt, and they fried it.
Oh, okay, but it wasn't boiled.
No.
Okay.
Well, they did make corn dumplings that they boiled, like when they had stews.
So it was cornmeal dumplings. Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar
and
with
chicken,
those.
They made chicken. They did dumplings.
Okay. Ah, that sounds yummy. Did you ever make pone bread or fig pudding?
I made fig pudding. I never made pone bread, but my mother did.
Okay. Were there fishermen in your family that fished commercially or just for, you
My
know?
brothers did commercial. Well, not commercial. I don't guess it.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Was it commercial? No, my brothers did.
Okay.
My brother Chancey, my oldest brother.
I see. Okay. Yes, and Mr. Chancey and Kathleen lived right up the road here from you. Mm-hmm. I remember them. What do you recall about any fish houses or ice houses in the village?
I didn't hear that.
What do you recall about fish houses in the village?
Well,
or landings?
The men used to sit up here. We called it the Mill Creek, and they would mend their nets. And sometimes you'd see them with their drying fish on the end of the fish house.
Oh, okay. They would dry the fish, you mean put it in salt and then hang it to dry?
You know, they just hung it up there to dry, I think.
Okay. That's interesting. And this was up at the very end of the Noddard Road here.
They called it the Mill Creek.
Mill Creek. What about Yopon tea? Have you ever made that?
No.
No? No.
My mother used to get it from Miss Maritime over here.
Oh, I've heard
She made it,
Miss Maritime.
but none of us ever drank it. My mother did, but none of the rest of the family.
Okay. Yes, I've tried it, and I actually like it. What about the churches here? Where were they located when you were growing up? And describe any differences between the denominations.
Well, course, there was a Methodist church that we attended, Methodist Church South. It was called Methodist Episcopal. And then the one here at the north where your people's, we went there in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. They had a service.
Now that's the house that I grew up in that became the church, right?
You went to that north church. Well, that's where Mr. Ivy went and Miss Mary, your grandparents.
My grandparents, yes. So,
we went to Sunday school and church down at Methodist Church. And then in the afternoon, and sometimes at night, we'd go to the church here up here.
Okay, yes. What about major storms that you experienced here? Do you recall any of the major storms?
The one in 44. I remember all the people coming here. There were 60 people in this house.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I can remember my folks trying to feed them all.
Oh, my word, 60 people. And no warning
anyway,
either.
When the water would go down, then they'd go to their homes.
And that was a terrible storm. I think people, I still hear people talk about it, how bad it was. Are you familiar with the term land tide?
The what?
Land tide, have you heard that term? It was mentioned in Stanley Green's book.
Say it again, I just don't know.
Land tide?
Land tide?
Yes.
No, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I think that's just a term that maybe he used, and it probably just means tide coming from the sound. People used to talk about areas in the village called Dog Ridge and Cat Ridge. Can you tell me where those areas were and why they were called those names?
Well, Dog Ridge was down the south end of the village. Cat Ridge was up there where the Scarboroughs lived, on Scarborough Town Road.
Okay. Do you have any idea why they were called those names?
No, I don't.
Just somebody coined them. And people called the Northern Spain. Do you know why that was?
Spain?
Uh-huh.
I never understood that, no.
Okay.
I never knew why they did that.
Okay. In Kinnakeet Adventure, Mr. Green stays at Mrs. Keaton's boarding house. Can you tell me anything about Mrs. Keaton or her boarding house and where it was located?
Miss Keaton, Beth, what was her name? First name? Beth.
I think it was Rebecca. Yes.
She used to deliver milk. And my mother brought milk from her. And cream.
Mm-hmm.
And she had the teachers live there with her. Most of the teachers. Mr. Green lived with her.
Okay.
And all the other teachers did except Miss Jeanette. She lived at Buxton, the first grade teacher.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We mentioned Breeze Inn earlier and Lover's Lane. Do you know anything about either of those places where they were located?
What was located?
Breeze Inn.
Breeze Inn was out to the east of the village, abreast of where, where Martha lived, and
Martha and Necky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Out there to the east of that.
Okay,
that's where that was located.
Okay, around about where the hotel is, around in there.
More to the north, I think.
Okay, I see. Maybe where the fire station is, around about that area.
Yeah.
I see, okay. What about Lover's Lane? Where was that?
I don't know. Never heard of that.
It was just mentioned in the book. Where was Big Kinnakeet Life Saving Station, and can you describe what it looked like? Did you go there often and have family stationed there?
The station?
Mm-hmm.
The one...
The Big Kinnakeet.
I can remember going there with my father. He used to deliver groceries to the store sometime.
I see. Okay.
And I can remember going there, and they were baking sheep's head for their lunch.
It's a delicious fish. So it was located between Avon and Buxton.
Yeah, he didn't have a car. Then he just had a horse and cart, and I went with him.
Oh, how interesting! That must have been fun.
Yeah.
Tell me about the post office and the mail delivery.
Well, Miss Velma had the post office, and it seemed to me like it was out there west of where Audrey's house is. It may have been a little farther south.
Okay.
And then it moved out to the beach. It seems like it was on the beach, and then it moved down south where, where it is, or where it was.
Okay.
Mr. Charlie Williams' place down there.
Okay. Do you recall ever going to what's called Benny's Landing, waiting for the mail to come in?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Charlie Williams, he
was
ran
the
postmaster then. Okay. Yeah. What were the names of the boats that carried freight, fish, mail, and people to and from Avon? I know you mentioned one that your grandfather had called the Ruth. Missouri.
Mr. Walker's
Okay, the Missouri.
boat,
okay.
and he carried freight.
Okay.
People.
Okay. And
that's the only one I know.
Okay. And you mentioned that your grandfather had a boat earlier on called the Ruth,
My grandfather.
Right? Or it was your father?
No, that was my father I was talking about.
Your father had. Okay,
yeah.
I apologize. Can you tell me about traveling to other villages on the island and how and why you would go there if you traveled by horse and cart or...
Well,
did you ever take trips?
We never went up to when they had the old Christmas up at Rhode Island. We never went there to that.
Okay. Okay.
I never went there.
Okay. I wasn't allowed to go.
They were having fights. The men would fight, and
that's what I heard.
Those people didn't want their children to go.
Sure. I wasn't allowed up there either, and that was much later in time too. What about Buxton and Hatteras? Did you ever, or Frisco,
yes,
go down that way?
Used to go to Hatteras. They had movies at the Hatteras.
Okay.
And I could remember going down there to the movies.
Okay. And did you travel by horse and cart?
Well, we had a cart then.
Okay.
When they had the movies, we had a car.
You had a car, okay. And was that
before? I would go with my brother Milton.
Okay.
Mirren and I would go with him.
I see.
Sometimes.
Now, was that before the roads were paved? Did you have to travel on the wash of the beach to get down there? Okay.
The road wasn't paved until early 60s.
Okay.
I think it was 63 that we got to see that, but I'm not sure.
Okay. It might have been the early 50s, actually. The only reason I'm saying is I went to school in Buxton and they were paved then, so I'm thinking it was the early 50s.
Maybe it was the 50s, yeah.
Yeah. How was Christmas celebrated in Avon? Do you have any fond memories of Christmas?
The main thing was church. We had most of the children were in the pageant. And that was on Christmas Eve. And we usually had our dinner at home was on Christmas Eve.
Okay. Now, what about gift giving? Was that a very big thing back when you were growing up, or?
But we didn't ever hear about Santa Claus then.
No, Santa Claus. That's a modern day addition.
Yes, we hung up our stockings. Usually got an orange or just something small.
Something small.
Or my mother made us a doll or something.
That was actually better than the excess we have now. What other holiday or special celebrations took place in the village? Were there any other celebrations, holidays? Maybe Easter, anything that was done at that time?
Easter we didn't think of it as a celebration. It was too sacred,
Sure.
Just church.
Just church, okay. What about Pirates Jamboree? Do you remember anything about that, or was that a later
festivity?
Okay. What was life like here during World War II? Do you recall anything about blackouts or ships being offshore, submarines?
That was in the 40s.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I went away to work. I was working away then. I wasn't here.
Didn't experience it. Okay. Can you describe how the landscape has changed down here? What did it look like when you were growing up here versus now with all the buildings?
The only thing I can remember is it seems like there was out to the east, of course there was no highway, but
okay. Do you recall when they put the dike around the village? When they built the dike?
The dike came, seems like, was that in the 40s? Late 40s.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share? I see that we're drawing to a close. And
No.
I have no more questions. But
No.
well, thank you very much for the interview.
Well, I wish I could give you more.
Oh, well, you've certainly given enough information, and that wonderful book that you wrote, and I'm trying to recall the name of it, the book. It's just loaded with information. Stories of the Outer Banks and Bankers Dear to My Heart by Brooksie Meekins Kuhl. It's a wonderful book. I have it at home, and I've enjoyed reading it. Well, thank you so much, Miss Brooksie. I appreciate the interview.
You're very welcome, Cheryl.